Like maybe I can't do a full workout. Maybe I can't do that exercise the way she demonstrated. But what can you do? Every movement counts. Every movement matters, even if it's just one repetition. And I think, especially with exercise and fitness, we have this all or nothing mentality that unless I do the big full thing, it's not worth doing it all. And nothing could be further from the truth. So keep it simple. Just ask yourself, what can I do today? And you'll be so proud of yourself for showing up. And that's going to move you in the right direction.
Well, it's a real pleasure to have Megan Dahlman on the show. Welcome.
Thank you, Zora. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm excited. We were talking for so long before we hit record. I was so intrigued by you and your work and everything that you do. And you make these amazing videos and helping women with a lot of issues. But I want to really focus today on joint pain and back pain, hip pain, knee pain. And this is one of your specialties. And you've been working with women for over 17 years now, more or
We're
less.
coming up on 20. It's
Gosh.
yeah, it's been a minute. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay. So you've, yeah, been doing this for a long time and you specialize really in the pain management. So I want to know first, why did you even choose this sector of pain? Like it's kind of painful. And why are so many of us feeling so much pain in midlife?
I feel like the sector chose me. It was kind of inevitable for a couple of reasons. My first job straight out of college, I wasn't able to get a job as a trainer right away. I was hired on at a company that had a physical therapy section and an athletic performance section. And I was really interested in the athletic performance development, working with athletes. That was fun and flashy. And so they knew they wanted to hire me, but a position wasn't opened yet. So they pulled me in on the PT side, and I was a physical therapist aide for quite a while. And am so thankful that I spent those years working alongside physical therapists and working in pain management and rehab. So beneficial because in all of my years training, I have yet to meet a single person who has a perfect body that does not have some sort of pain somewhere or some kind of dysfunction somewhere on their body. And so, knowing how to handle that and manage that and help them overcome it, not just work around it. I know that there are a lot of personal trainers that are like, well, your wrist hurts, so let's just not do any like arm exercises for the next 2 months and hope and pray that it gets better. I'm able to get in there and be like, oh, your wrist hurts. Let's do this and this to improve the way your wrist feels in the next few days. You're going to feel so much better. And it allows us to just keep moving and keep working forward and overcome all of these painful barriers along the way for people. So, midlife pain in particular, there's so many reasons why so many people in midlife are feeling pain. There's not one singular reason, but a lot of it is just years of dysfunction and compensation patterns that we develop. Maybe we've always sat a certain way, or we've always had a pelvis that's tilted a certain way, or years ago we had an injury on the knee and that kind of changed our gait a little bit. And so when you just have time, as a factor, things compound over time. And sometimes you just kind of reach that threshold where it compounds to the point where it becomes painful. And this is where some arthritis can happen. Arthritis is not something, as you know, Zora, it's not something that happens overnight. It takes time. And it's just a little bit of breakdown over time. And eventually it reaches this threshold where you experience pain. You want to do something about it. The other thing in midlife is that we really start to lose muscle mass dramatically if we don't do something about it. And then our hormones come into play. Hormones affect muscle mass, but when our hormones, we're in this crazy environment with our hormones changing and we're losing muscle mass, and these dysfunctional movement patterns are starting to compound, that's where we start to experience pain. So it's not something that happens overnight, but it's also not something that you have to live with because usually these issues all have solutions.
Do you think that women have higher pain thresholds? Because it seems to me that we kind of push through things, accepting it as normal. And I've heard that women have higher pain thresholds, but you've worked with men and women. So what are you saying?
I definitely believe that women have higher pain thresholds. I think that there's some research that proves that, but we also have a lot of mental strength too, where we are willing to push through pain. Even we might be experiencing the same pain level as someone else or as a man, but our like drive and grit to push through pain is pretty common among us women. And it's not okay because a lot of us are pushing through pain and it makes things worse or slowly over time, imperceptibly, we're losing our overall mobility. Our activity level is decreasing just because we're pushing through pain all the time. So it's not okay for us to push through pain at all.
Yeah. And as we get some issue like osteoarthritis, because that's something I
Right.
understand very well, you get a little niggle or a little pain. You're like, ah,
Yeah.
it's going to go away, whatever. You kind of ignore it. And then it gets a little louder and it gets a little louder. But then at least I've just make up excuses that, oh, it's just this or it's just that. Or people say it's just aging. It's normal. And
Right.
it's
Right.
not normal. It's common, but it's not normal. And was telling myself that too. I was like, maybe this is just the way it is, or that's the way it's going to be. And you can handle it for a while. And I think that the tolerance gets greater and greater as the pain goes
Yeah.
because it is subtle in the beginning and you think it's normal. And I remember walking around hobbling actually with a limp. And I
Yeah.
look at other
Yeah.
people, I'm like, why aren't they limping? Like, why, why everybody should be, I mean, I'm working on my
Right.
body so hard and trying to be normal. Like, I couldn't understand. And that's when I thought, okay, there's something wrong here because
We
nobody's doing
start to normalize that.
it.
It's so true.
Yes.
And we see this especially with back pain in midlife. And I know we're going to talk more about back pain too, but it's something that gets really normalized in aging populations. Like, oh, you hit 40 years old and suddenly your back starts hurting, and ha ha ha, it's just part of aging. It's like, no, actually, it's part of something else that's going on that's completely fixable. And same with like hip pain or shoulder pain. And we normalize because it is common. We start to have those conversations like, oh, this is just the way it is right now. And so we don't ask the questions why, and we don't ask the question, what can I do about it? So we stop seeking a solution. We don't seek a solution at all because it never occurs to us that a solution exists.
Hmm. Well, we do actually look at too many things too. Sometimes we don't even focus
Right.
on one.
Yeah.
We're taking a supplement and then we do some procedure and then we do a massage and then we do this and that. And when you are feeling pain, when it gets strong enough, you think, okay, I'll do anything. I'll just
Yeah.
want to feel better. But living with chronic pain is so bad. I have such a empathy for people who do. I didn't understand what that was before.
Yeah.
And you can't relate. I mean, how you can, but when you do have this, it is life altering. And I know that some people have migraines and that's a horrible pain, and other people may have a pain on their joint and they can't sleep. And there's all different kinds of pain out there. But when we're talking about menopause and the woman who's going through menopause and it's so common. I hear, oh, I have suddenly joint pain on like all their joints, not just
Yeah.
their hip or just their back. So how does the menopause transition and this loss of our hormones affect our joints in particular?
The primary reason is estrogen is a very powerful anti-inflammatory. It's almost like your joints, when you have estrogen, when you have adequate and stable amounts of estrogen in your body, it's almost like you're taking daily internal Advil. Like it's just always there, keeping inflammation at bay. And so as your estrogen starts to exit, now we don't have that natural anti-inflammatory in our joints. And so we have those estrogen receptors all over our body and especially in our joints, but also so in your connective tissues, so the tendons and the ligaments that connect your joints together, in your muscles, muscle cells as well, but also the synovial fluid in a joint. So you have liquid in your articulating joints, and that fluid is really sensitive to estrogen. And when estrogen gets removed from that fluid, becomes more inflamed And when it's inflamed, it becomes kind of picture like honey, like old honey when it kind of crystallizes. Like really fresh honey is like gooey and liquidy and kind of viscous. When it's old honey, like the honey that's like you forgot about on the back of your cabinet, it's crystallized a little bit and it's chunky and it's hard to move. That's kind of what happens to the synovial fluid in your joints. So that's why you start to feel a lot of that pain. The good news is that moving, when we take that honey and we start to move it and we manipulate it and we heat it up and we move it, that fluid starts to regain some of its viscosity, even though it's kind of old still, didn't suddenly get younger, but we can restore some of the integrity of that fluid, which is great. That's great news. But those are kind of the reasons why we feel joint pain on mostly the joints that are articulating joints. And those joints are called synovial joints. And they're called that way because they have this fluid, the synovial joint fluid.
That's super interesting. That's why they say motion is lotion, right?
Yes,
It's
that's
bringing
exactly why.
more
Yeah.
fluid. So movement has always been on the table for me ever since the first time I complained about pain. It was just doctor prescribed, go to rehab or go get moving. And I'm glad I did. And that definitely helps a lot. But I do now in my sector around menopause, I do meet a lot of women who complain about joints. And the moment they get on hormones, great, it goes away. And then there's women who it doesn't work. And so that's when I go, okay, maybe it's not your hormones, it's something else. And that certainly was my case. Although
Right.
I was hoping, I was like, oh, maybe these hormones will remove this pain. But I had injuries and I had
Yep.
issues and I had a lot of other things that I know now, but I didn't know back then. And maybe some people do have some injury that's contributing to that. But my question then is, how do you determine when you have a client, is it hormones or is it something else?
I like to think of it in two categories. Pain can come from mechanical reasons or chemical reasons. So, the chemical reasons, that's what we're talking about, the hormone fluctuations. So, that's where the chemical, like the internal chemical structure of the joint has been altered somehow. And so, by changing the chemical structure, by following an anti-inflammatory lifestyle, perhaps replacing some of those hormones, that's where you're going to feel the improvement in how those joints function. But if we have a mechanical breakdown, that's what you experienced, where you actually had the mechanism itself, like the hinge joint, the ball and socket joint, like no longer mechanically is operating the way that it was originally designed to do. No chemical changes will fix that. Like you can't throw a bunch of hormones at that or throw a bunch of anti-inflammatory lifestyle at that when you literally no longer have cartilage on your bone. When the bone itself or the tendons and the ligaments are damaged or frayed or the labrum is ripped, like you can't change the chemical makeup to improve the mechanical functioning. So it's really helpful to see both sides. And so when we don't know what's going on, it's like, well, then let's start to help on both sides. Let's look at your lifestyle and see if there's some ways that we can improve the overall quality of your healthy habits and see if we can improve like whether or not you actually have some of this chemical inflammation happening in your body. Let's get your hormones in a good place. That's almost the easy part. The mechanical side, that's always going to come down to let's look at your alignment. Let's look at the mobility of the joint. Let's look at the strength of the structures and the stability of the structures around the joint. Can we improve those things? And quite often, by doing that, we can make a joint feel so much better. So it's sometimes both, but sometimes it's one or the other. And I think in your case, it was definitely the mechanical side.
I threw everything at it. I had the diet,
Yeah.
I had the
Yeah.
exercise, the treatments, and that's that in the end. That's why I had to get the two hip replacements because
Yep.
after a while it didn't work. But I think I delayed the surgery a lot by the things that I've done, and perhaps I would have had it much earlier. That's my case. Part of me kind of goes, oh, it still believes the body can heal. If I just maybe figured out earlier, maybe it could have. I don't know. I'll never know, but Let's talk a little bit about back pain and some of the people
Yeah.
you've helped with their back pain, because that's a really common thing. I haven't had that myself, but it just seems that almost the one most prevalent one is back pain. And that I've heard that with much younger people too. It's not like an old person's
Right.
thing. It can happen all throughout life, and there are many reasons. So what are you seeing in your world in terms of back pain and what's causing this, and how do you help someone overcome it?
So, back pain is extremely prevalent. It's one of the most common reasons why people miss work. It's one of the most common reasons why people visit the ER is just because of back pain, because it can come and go or be really dull and chronic. It can be like really intense and spasm-like. It's kind of all over the map, but 540 million Americans right now are suffering from back pain. Um,
540 million Americans with that's a lot. That is,
Those are just the ones that are saying they are.
yeah.
I'm curious how many millions of women, like we mentioned earlier, are pushing through back pain and saying that they don't. They
Yeah.
are in denial that they actually have it. So, with back pain, I like to, when we think about the mechanical side, so going back to the function of the back, I like to think of it in terms of three things: the posture, or essentially the alignment of all the structures, the strength of all of the structures, and the flexibility of all the structures. Are all of those three things, so PSF, so posture, strength, flexibility, are all of those things optimal? And usually, for someone who is experiencing back pain, something's off. They might have poor alignment, and that's causing pain. So they might go see their chiropractor, and that helps, heals them for a week. They feel better, but then the alignment slips back. They lose the alignment again. Common cause of poor alignment is quite often a pelvis that's tilted forward or slumped under. So we see a really excessive arching at the low back or a super flat low back. And what that does when your pelvis shifts and tilts forward or slumps under, it places your lumbar spinal segments out of alignment. So it makes your back flat or excessively arched, which puts a lot of pressure on those discs. So alignment, that's a huge thing. And then the strength, how strong is your core? How strong are your glutes? If your core is not strong, if your glutes are not strong, if your hip muscles are not strong, this creates a bigger chance for instability and things to fall out of alignment. Now we have that posture issue again. And then that third piece is the flexibility. Now, your lumbar spine is actually not designed to be flexible. This is where a lot of people get it wrong. They'll try to fix their low back by doing a lot of low back stretches. The low back, if you look at the spinal segments of the lumbar spine in particular, it's not designed to move very much. It's designed to be like a really strong, stable support for the rest of your body. Your hip socket is designed to be very mobile, very flexible, have a lot of range of motion. So if your hip socket, if you have tight hips, your back is going to take the brunt of the stress because it's going to start to have to flex and twist and do way more than it ever was supposed to. And so we want to look at the flexibility of the hips. So usually we can relieve a lot of low back pain and even hip pain by paying better attention to alignment, improving the strength of the core and the hips, and improving the mobility of the hips, the flexibility of the hips. And usually with those three things, back pain that someone may have suffered from for decades can be resolved real quick because finally things are sitting level and functioning the way they should be.
It's interesting because we're talking about back pain, and yet the treatments were get the
Hips.
core and the hips strong,
Mhm.
and then the mobility of the hips. And so we're not talking about stretching the back like I guess a lot of
No.
people would intuitively do. I mean, that's what I would do, is search back back stretches.
Back stretches, back stretches. And that is our go-to when something hurts. And I actually had someone reach out to me the other day. They're like, and I can't remember what the body part was, but they're like, do you have any stretches for this? My knee hurts. Do you have any stretches for this? Pain does not always equal stretching. Like stretching is not always going to get rid of the pain. We have felt like that for a long time because when you stretch something that is supposed to be stretchy or flexible, it can resolve the pain, but not every part on your body is supposed to be flexible. And
Mhm.
if it's too flexible, when it's not supposed to be, that's where we can actually run into issues. That's where people slip a disc. That's where we get a lot of arthritis in the lumbar spine because we get unnecessary wear and tear on your spinal segments and on those discs because they're bending too much. They're twisting too much in your everyday movements rather than having strength and stability around those spinal segments.
So then why are people having this misalignment or the inflexibility? What is the root cause? Or in when, because sometimes you're like, is it the chicken or the egg? Is it
Right.
why are we having this problem in the first place with so many people?
Something starts it and then it spirals. Like it just kind of keeps perpetuating itself. Usually it's something things are out of balance somehow. Either you're someone who does a lot of workout, like maybe you are a very active person. You exercise a lot, but you've never followed a very balanced routine. You've done a lot of like spot training, like just training particular muscles, like just bicep curls or shoulder raises, or just doing exercises for very specific muscles. Over time, that can create a lot of imbalance over your body. A lot of like quad exercises. If you're doing a lot of quad exercises for lower body and you don't balance that out with the same amount, if not more, glute and hamstring exercises, that wreaks havoc on your lumbar spine, believe it or not. So I see a lot of women in particular that they're like, I'm really fit. I've worked out my entire life. I've stayed active. Why do I have so much back pain? It's because core work has only ever been like crunches and sit-ups or V-ups or bicycle crunches or things like moving in that direction. And the rest of your training has been a lot of like spot training work rather than seeing the big picture and keeping things balanced. So that's one reason. The other reason is just not being active at all. Someone who sits a lot. When you're in a sitting position, your hips are bent. That puts a lot of strain, that tightens up your hips over time. Your hips become really stiff. Some of my most popular content that I create is like solutions for tight hips. Like tight hips is a very common thing. And if you have tight hips for long enough, your low back is going to start to hurt. And so tight hips stem from sitting too much, or if maybe your only activity is walking, you're only ever walking in that one plane of motion and you're only ever moving your legs forward and back about 10 degrees. Your hips need to move all the way up past 90 degrees and then behind your body about 15 degrees. And so if we're not, and like rotational out to the side. So if you're not every day moving your hips in those different ranges of motion, over time they slowly get stiffer and stiffer, and suddenly your back hurts. And so you end up doing back stretches when it's your hips that need to get stretched out.
It's incredible. Yeah, hips. What about hyper flexible people, which
Mm,
that was one of my risk factors for osteoarthritis. And I always thought it was really cool. I was born like this, didn't have to, it could look cool in a yoga class. But there were
sure.
some yoga teachers who said, hey, you don't go that far. And I was like, why not? So what about those people who are hyper flexible? Do they have problems? I mean, I have
Yes.
back pain, but maybe oh, I obviously had other problems, but
Yeah.
what are you
Yeah.
seeing?
So being hyper flexible leads to a lack of stability.
Mhm.
So now you've got many joints on your body that need to be stable. The knee is a really good example of that. If your knee is wobbly because all of the muscles around your knee, like your hamstrings are super flexible, quads are super flexible, hips are crazy flexible, like the knee can endure a lot of pain and deal with a lot of dysfunction at the knee because it's twisting in motions it was never designed to twist. This is where we can end up having a meniscus tear or other ligament issues. Same with the hip. And I like to say that the hip is a really interesting joint because it's supposed to be strong and long. So there's certain areas on your body that need to be strong and long. If all it is long, we're going to have problems. If there's no strength around the hip joint, if all it is strong and there's no flexibility there, we're going to have problems too. So what true mobility is, good mobility means that you have a long range of motion or a big range of motion for that joint, whatever that joint is designed to be able to do. The knee joint works different than the hip joint. They move differently. So like the hip, how big of a range of motion is that hip supposed to have? And can you be strong throughout that whole range of motion? A great test of this, if you're someone who's super flexible, can you sit down into a really deep squat and get yourself up out of it without holding on to anything? So that's like you have the depth, you might have that flexibility to go all the way down that deep, but can you have the strength to get yourself all the way up out of that range of motion? That's really important.
Oh, that's a good test, or at least something to work up to.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's really cool. So, so actually, you kind of hit the nail on the head with me. I had an ACL tear when I was younger. So I can now put all the pieces together.
Right?
But that's the hyperflexibility probably at play right there. I probably had my period or something during that time too, on top of it.
Probably. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And most younger women who experience an ACL tear, it's very often related to weak hamstrings, weak glutes. And so maybe later in life, they never corrected that. Their hamstrings and glutes have always just been really flexible, but not strong. And so when you're not using your knee as much as an older adult and you're not doing those like cutting sports anymore, the weak hamstrings and the weak glutes translates to having a bad back or
Mhm.
back pain or hip issues. So you don't see a lot of women in midlife tearing their ACLs because it's a non-contact, like cutting type of injury. But you do see a lot of those same women experiencing hip replacements and back pain, maybe knee replacements too. So, yeah, it all kind of goes together.
Yeah, and I think one of the reasons why when we get to midlife, not only women but men as well, you do have some pains, and it's we've been through life. We've had injuries, or whether you're active and athletic or you're sedentary, like it's you're doomed either way in some way as we age. But we want to be able to be strong. And I wish I knew things back then when I was younger that I know now. And there was one person I interviewed, and she said that everybody should get I think it was something like a posture analytic, like somebody to really look at their posture
Yeah.
and tell them if there are any deviations or things to work on. Because when you think, like you said, that it could be something a little out of alignment, and part for me, I always think when I was in my 20s and injured my ACL, my whole life for 30 years, my knee, my knee, my knee, be careful, my knee,
Yep.
putting weight on the other side,
There it
making
is.
sure, and I
Yeah.
must have been 30
Yep.
years, micro movements. I mean, I was doing
Oh,
everything I wanted to do, but when you think
yeah.
about those possibly micro movements because you were slightly out of alignment over time, it may come
Well,
back.
to put it into perspective, we've all been tasked to walk like 10,000 steps a day. I don't know who decided that, but the 10,000 steps a day like goal, it's a good goal. But if you think about it, 10,000 repetitions every single day. Can you imagine doing any exercise for 10,000 reps? So if you have some sort of compensation or you're putting more weight on one leg or your stride is a little shorter when you step on that side, when you compound that 10,000 steps a day, give or take, some days might be more, some days might be less, over how many years? Of course, we're going to have an issue. So looking at your alignment is really key. But I will say this, just having so many years of experience training people, sometimes just looking at how someone is standing, you can't tell. Once they start moving, once they start sitting into a squat, once they get into a hip hinged position, once they do like a lunging motion, once they do an arm movement, that's where you start to see the breakdowns in the function. So I've had so many clients where coming in, they look great. I don't see nothing is glaring. And then as soon as they start to do a squat, it's like, whoa, there it is. Or a hip hinge, whoa, there it is. So this is why it would be probably the most beneficial thing would be to work with just a really good trainer who has an eye for alignment and detail. And they can be able to correct your technique. Everybody's body anatomically is a little bit different. So when you do the movement, it might not look like textbook, but we got to be able to determine is, even though it's not textbook, is that a possibility for eventual pain? Is that something that we need to pay attention to? So sometimes movements, I'll see someone just line up for a squat and they naturally want to do a squat that's a little bit wider or a little bit narrower than like textbook hip width apart. And I look at that and I watch their movements. It's like that for them, that looks really great. It's symmetrical. The joints are aligned nicely. It's just a little wider than, and I'm not going to say anything because I don't want to mess with their head of, am I doing it right? Oh no, I'm always doing it wrong. And I know just looking at them like that squat, that's your squat, and you're never going to hurt yourself by doing it that way because the parts that matter are in the right places. And so your squat might look different than someone else's squat. So this is where just having a really good trained eye can be helpful to help you know, am I doing this right?
So how do we find somebody like that who's well trained? Because especially if you don't know what to look for.
Well, if you do have dramatic pain at the moment, like something that is really hindering your ability to function properly, it is helpful to work with someone one-on-one. So to find a good personal trainer or physical therapist, those are the two. I'm a strength and conditioning specialist, which is just a different way of saying trainer, but those are the people that pay attention to movement versus like a massage therapist or like a chiropractor. Many of them just look at you on a table, laying flat or maybe standing up straight. You want someone who pays attention to movement and technique. But if you don't have dramatic pain at the moment, so I provide a lot of online training programs that are just follow along. And the way that I cue in the videos, like how to like check this, pull this in, tuck this right here, like move this way, exhale here. I know that my cues, whoever is watching it on the other side, I can help them be 99% of the way there to good technique. And I've had a lot of people go through like my core training programs and they'll be like, oh my goodness, I've always done these exercises before, but I've never done them like that. And after just 5 days, I feel entirely different. And a lot of it is just the specific cueing and the technique tips that I can give you as we're doing it together.
Okay, I need a link to that.
Yeah,
Can you
yeah,
put that in
it's
the show
easy.
notes?
Just 5daycore.com. So the number
Uh-huh.
5daycore.com. It's totally free. I have another one that's all about glutes, and that's 5dayglutes.com.
Oh, that
So
sounds great.
those are so helpful. So, so, so helpful.
I love that. Do you
Yeah.
do one-to-one? If somebody said, I want to work with you one-to-one and send you a video, and could you work with
So
them?
I do not do that anymore. I would be overwhelmed. And I actually had reached the point where I was like, I'm overwhelmed. So I put all of my training into online courses that people can follow so that I'm now able to coach thousands of people around the world now. The beauty of that, though, is that what I do provide in my online programs is that we do a weekly coaching call live.
Oh,
So
cool.
people can hop on and be like, my knee always bothers me when I do this movement. Can you break it down for me a little bit more than what you did in the video and maybe explain why it could possibly be hurting? And those live coaching calls are invaluable. So I make sure that we have ways to get someone the help they need to make sure that their body is moving better than it's ever moved before.
Oh, that's great. Do you do these courses? Is it only for people in the US, or if somebody's living in
Global.
Japan or Europe?
Global. I have customers right now in Africa, in the Philippines, in India, many in the UK, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, US, all
Okay,
over the
so the
world.
time zone isn't a problem. That's my
Does
question.
not matter.
Oh, cool.
No, you can do it anywhere.
Okay, let's go back to the back pain or just maybe joint pain in general. So, what are you seeing the most common movement mistakes that women are
Mm.
making that lead to some kind of a joint pain?
Yeah, I think the biggest mistakes that people are making is just not moving enough in general. And like we said, not moving enough is just not going to stimulate your muscles enough, and they'll slowly atrophy over time. They just will if they're not being used. But then the other biggest mistake is not moving through full ranges of motion. And when you stop using a joint through its full range of motion, look at how a baby squats. They can squat all the way down to the back of their heel. And usually, all the way through adolescence, they're able to do that. And then we kind of reach a point where our daily life doesn't include playing on the floor anymore. And we kind of stop doing that deep squat. And pretty soon, that joint, I like to think of it getting like rusty. Like it just kind of stiffens in those deeper ranges of motion, and we lose the capacity to move through those full ranges of motion. This
Have you
is really common. Go ahead. Did you have a question about that?
have you been to Vietnam?
I have not been there, but I know what you're talking about. The deep squatting. Yes.
Everyone.
Asian cultures, it is very ingrained in the culture to squat deeply every day until you're 100 years old.
I've never seen it as much as I've seen in Vietnam. And what you do when you go to a cafe, anywhere, or noodle shop, whatever restaurant,
Sure.
they have baby stools. You know, when you have little kids, you have the little baby stool. Like
Yeah.
everyone adult is sitting on a baby stool. So you have to be able to squat if you just want to go out and have a coffee. It's unbelievable that you can see that life gently nudges them into keeping this natural squat. The flexibility, mobility, agility of these people is so good. And you see it from a 90-year-old woman to a 2-year old. Like everyone's able to
Yes.
squat. And actually, I did a whole video on that because I was so impressed. But sorry to
It's
cut you off, but I
incredible.
was
No, no, no. It's so poignant because that is being able to do a deep squat impacts your experience at life. Like it impacts almost everything. One of the biggest complaints I hear from women as they age, and from men too, honestly, is losing the ability to climb down on the floor and get back up again easily. And it's something so simple, but it's once you lose that ability to do that, you feel you live in fear. There's always this tinge of fear in the back of your mind that what happens if I need to get down there and I can't get back up again and no one's around to help me up. And just the simple act of working on a deep squat every day. And a great way to practice it is to just stand at your kitchen sink and wrap your fingers like into the sink so that your hands are like on the edge of the counter and your fingers are in the sink. And use that to help offload your weight to squat all the way down as deep as you can. And at first, you might only get to 90 degrees with your knees, maybe not even there. But over time, using the counter to help offload your weight so that if you don't have the strength yet, we can at least start working on the mobility. So over time, being able to squat all the way down, touching your butt to your heels and getting back up again. That's not just working on knee mobility. That's getting your hips to bend really deeply. It's getting your ankles to bend really deeply. As we get older, we lose the most mobility in our ankles, our knees, our hips, and our shoulders.
mm,
Those are the big joints that we lose mobility. So by doing hitting three of those with one motion, the squat, the deep squat, we're getting your ankles, your knees, and your hips all in one move. And so every woman should, whether they're 40 or 70, should be practicing a deep squat every day.
When I had osteoarthritis and it was getting really bad, I got to that point where I needed to use my hands to get off the
Yeah.
floor,
Yeah.
and it was just living in fear. Crossing the street made me scared because I wasn't sure if I could cross it fast enough in case a car was going too
Ooh.
fast. And if you've been to Vietnam, you got to cross
You got
fast.
to zip. You got
And
yeah.
but it was a horrible feeling to live in fear like that, and not
Yeah.
trust your body. It's the
To
worst
feel
thing I've ever been
vulnerable.
through in my life. But I now can, because I've had the surgeries, and I work on always trying to get off the floor, not using my hands. It's just something that I keep in my head, and I'm so grateful for every time I
Yes.
can. But if you can remember that, just even if you have to use one hand or two hands, but gradually go up with that little goal in mind. I think that may help us through life now in the end, so you don't lose this
100%.
mobility.
100%. Because that's the last thing you want to experience with every passing year is that feeling of being vulnerable and afraid. And there is something called fear aversion. Like the moment that fear sets in, you might not notice it, but you start to move less. And it doesn't look blatant. You might not realize it's happening, but when you have that fear, and it could be pain related, or just that your mobility isn't as great as it could be, or your balance isn't great, you're going to start moving less, which means that you lose even more mobility, which means that you move even less. So it's this like cascade effect that keeps going. And one day you wake up and you're like, how did I get here?
And all the pain that goes with it.
Yes, yes.
So you mentioned the mistakes are just not moving enough and
Yep.
not losing your ability to squat. Those are
Yeah.
two big
Not
mistakes.
moving through full ranges of motion. I
Yeah.
think another one, we mentioned the shoulder too. The shoulder incidences of frozen shoulder in women in midlife, especially, go through the roof. And I would love to see a study done on how many women who experience frozen shoulder also are women who don't move their shoulders through full ranges of motion every day
Mm.
for one reason or
Yeah.
another. I'd be curious if those are correlated because keeping your joint, the shoulder joint needs a lot of motion, kind of like the hip. It needs to be able to move in really large ranges of motion. And that shoulder is really susceptible to inflammation once estrogen starts to leave. But like we said before, movement keeps it lubricated. And so if every day you're moving your shoulder through a full range of motion, we can hopefully try to avoid one of the most common injuries or one of the most common conditions for women in midlife, and that's the frozen shoulder.
That's so common. There's one girl
Yeah.
in my community who started using blood flow restriction bands. Do you know what
Mm.
that is? And
I
it's
do know what it is, but yeah.
She said she had frozen shoulder for ages and then could never get it out. And then she started using the bands every day. And she said 4 months later, no, she didn't do it every day. She said if she did it every day, it would happen earlier. But after 4 months, she said she's convinced it was the blood flow restriction. But I don't know of any studies with frozen shoulder and blood flow restriction. But I'm thinking that it could be that it was just more blood flow going in there. And I know whoever's listening is probably going, wait, you just said restricting blood flow. It's more like modifying the
It's a
flow of the
pump. It
blood.
creates more of a pump. Yeah. So the frozen shoulder is tricky. I think once it's frozen, so it goes through three phases: freezing, frozen, then thawing. We're just like ice up in here. So once it is actually frozen and locked down, that is a different strategy. And that can take a very long time to undo. Working with treatment modalities, working with physical therapists, being very strategic. So something like blood flow restriction would be probably very helpful in that situation. Heat and other types of therapy, massage tool. That's where when it's already frozen, when the issue has already happened and you're working on thawing it, like coming out the other side, yes, that's going to be super helpful. But for everyone who's listening that doesn't currently have frozen shoulder, that's where the preventative stuff. We got to do the preventative stuff. So as far as like doing blood flow restriction to prevent frozen shoulder from happening in the first place, I'm not sure that would really help it from occurring. I think the mobility work would be the absolute most effective to prevent the frozen shoulder from happening, whether it's happened to you in the past or you never want it to occur to you.
So what kind of mobility work?
So,
And I'm sure you have a
what,
video on it probably as
yeah,
well, right? If we
yeah,
go.
one of my favorite things to do is, I mean, super simple is just take your entire arm and move it like just in a big circle all day long, every day. The other thing that you can do is take your thumb and hold your thumb out, point your thumb down to your opposite hip. So it's like crossing in front of your body. And then bring your thumb up and open. You're going to just create like a big, like figure eight in the air. So by kind of turning the hand, you're actually spinning the humerus up in your shoulder socket. And so that's pulling it through a full range of motion every day. Just doing those like diagonal figure eights every day, that'll
YouTube
help.
and watch the video here because then you'll see
Yep.
us doing it.
I know. Yeah.
Okay, I do that. I do that. Oh, that's good. Usually, I try now. I have a gym nearby, and I'm trying to do more pull-ups. So usually, before my pull-up, I'm doing this like arm workout warm up, so I don't pull
Yes.
my shoulder joint out. But so that's good. If you have a goal like me and you're working on it, then you're forced to
I
do
love
these
it.
exercises before
I
you
love
do
it.
your pull-up.
Yeah. Yep. The shoulder is another one that needs to be strong and long. So making sure that it's got that good mobility in all directions and strong to do like a pull-up. I love it.
Oh, that's so cool. Okay. So let's see. You've talked about keeping full range of motion and actually moving. And you do have these superpowers. One of your superpowers is making fitness simple and doable. So, what are three habits or movement patterns that you wish every woman in midlife would start doing today?
Well, one we talked about already, and that's that squat every
Yeah.
day. Like doing that deep squat every day, that's huge for all the reasons we already mentioned. And in addition to that, what you said too, just climbing down on the floor and getting back up again every day. I know a lot of people will work down on the floor. Like they'll take their laptop, set it on the floor, and do work down on the floor and
That's
just
me.
like always be shifting in a position. It's awesome. I think another one is pelvic tilting. So practicing the pelvic tilting, and this sounds really funny, but basically think about tucking your tailbone under and then arching your tailbone out to the sky. It's kind of like in yoga doing cat cow, but just the pelvis part. You're not like trying to round your back or anything, but just if you can be in more tuned with your pelvis and how to make it move, then you're able to get your core to fire and function better. We're going to be able to get better action and mobility at your hips. We're going to be able to reduce a lot of back pain. A majority of back and hip pain stems from having a pelvis that's just not in a good position. So doing the pelvic tilting kind of every day is really helpful. And then honestly, one of the simplest things is just go for a walk every day. Just
Mm,
keep you moving, the
right.
stress relief, just the added extra movement. Also, just knowing, okay, that's something I can do even if I can't do a full workout. I can do a few deep squats. I can do a couple pelvic tilts. I can go for a 10-minute walk around the block. So, keeping it simple, but choosing the things that have really great impact on your health.
Oh, I like these. Okay, these are all like free, pretty
Yeah.
much. And you can do them at home, and you've got the videos there. So I want to do, actually, I have an idea because I got a list of pain management techniques that I've used that's been
Yeah.
recommended. But we're going to do like that on a scale of 1 to 10. How much do you think has this helped your clients relieve themselves of pain? You know, you've seen those videos, those reels, right? Like
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
whatever stuff. So let's do one of
Yep.
those and we'll just kind of
Okay.
rapid fire. And then if we want to
Okay.
talk deeper into it, we can do it after. So got like 10 of these more or less. Okay.
Okay.
On a scale of 1 to 10, your thoughts on alternative therapies to pain management, red light therapy,
2,
cold plunges,
7,
sauna,
7 or 8,
fascia release,
9,
massage,
9,
PRP or platelet rich plasma injections.
I've heard some good stuff, but there's question marks still there. I would put it right in the middle. Five,
Hyaluronic acid,
five,
hormone therapy,
7,
rehab exercises,
10,
acupuncture,
6,
and the last one is blood flow restriction.
5.
Okay. That's a reel right there for us. Going on
I
Instagram.
love it. Well, and the thing is, these are the things that might give you like a 1 to 2% edge. But the reality is, if you're not actively working and pumping your own muscles and getting the nerves to fire, and you're not working on joint stability and the mobility that we talked about, if you're just deconditioned, like none of these modalities are going to cure you. They could give you the 1 to 2% edge. If you know that you're the fitness side of things, the mechanical side of things, like you're moving in all the ways that you can, and you still want an edge, then sure, go for it. Some of them are a little bit better than others, but nothing is going to trump what simple, good quality movement can do for your pain.
Yeah, that's one thing I never stopped. I tried all of these things. Some of them helped a little bit, some of them not at all. So some of them a little bit more than others. But the movement and the rehab for me, as little as I could do, especially towards the end, I was still doing them as much as I could within
Yeah,
my range, limited range of motion, because I knew that if I'm going to get a surgery, that I will have a much better outcome and I will be
100%.
recovering a lot faster. And that was just my job. So I agree with you 100%. Like the
Yeah.
foundation has to be the movement. And I meet too many people who are in too much pain and I get it. Like it's too painful. I can't do this. I don't want to do this. And you go down this rabbit hole, but that's like the worst thing that you can do is give up and not move. And they'll say, I'll move when I post surgery, but it's going to be a slower recovery.
It's going to be a much slower recovery. And the challenge is to think in your mind every day. Ask yourself the question, what can I do? Like maybe I can't do a full workout. Maybe I can't do that exercise the way she demonstrated. Maybe I can't do that. But what can you do? Every movement counts. Every movement matters, even if it's just one repetition. And I think, especially with exercise and fitness, we have this all or nothing mentality that unless I do the big full thing, it's not worth doing it all. And nothing could be further from the truth. So keep it simple. Just ask yourself, what can I do today? And you'll be so proud of yourself for showing up. And that's going to move you in the right direction.
Well, you just answered my last question. So I even ask you that. So this has been such a great interview, and you're helping thousands of people through your YouTube channel, your Instagram, your programs. I'm going to have links to this in the show notes because people have absolutely got to find you if they're living in pain or want to avoid it. So much content out there. Is there anything that's coming up that you'd like to share that we should know about that's going on in your world?
Definitely, I definitely encourage everyone to sign up for my newsletter too. So my weekly Jumpstart newsletter, every week, twice a week, I'm sending out like one simple exercise that you can do, like for hip pain, with video demos. And I even give you nutrition tips and like beautiful recipes. And so it's not just me rambling in an email. Like this is really good value. And it's specifically for women in midlife. And we address the issues that I know everyone listening is dealing with. So just go to weeklyjumpstart.com and you could subscribe for free and you'll get that in your inbox twice a week.
Oh gosh, so much free content. I love it. We love free things. Thank
I
you
love it.
so much, Megan. And I look forward. I still have a lot more questions, but we're just going to have to save it for another time and hopefully have you on again. Okay.
For sure, Zora. Thank you so much. We'll definitely do a round two. Thank you for
Awesome.
having me.
Thank you. And thank you everyone who's made it to the end of the podcast. And we appreciate you spending your time with us. So have a wonderful day. Good night, good morning, wherever you're at. We'll see you next time.